On First at 9 this Tuesday, the 8th of April 2025. The tariff dilemma. Sri Lanka to negotiate lowering tariffs with US trade representatives tonight. President Derana writes to Trump requesting collaboration. Trump threatens more tariffs on China. Removing the IGP. Proposal to appoint a committee to remove Deshabandhu Tennakon as IGP passed in Parliament. Recovering assets. Proceeds of crime bill passed into law.
Proceeds of crime and has been passed without amendments.
Electronic identity. Sri Lanka to procure 17 million polycarbonate cards to issue ENICs.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lanka Kiren Perata. ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
කට්ට පරිස්සම් කරගත්තොත් අපි පරිස්සම්.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9, brought to you by the nation's most trusted news source, Derana. I'm Tharindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now, in your top story this evening, Deputy Minister of Economic Development Professor Anil Jayantha Fernando said that Sri Lanka will engage in discussions with US trade representatives tonight regarding the tariffs set to take effect tomorrow. He also mentioned that President Anura Dissanayake has personally requested US President Donald Trump to collaborate in reducing the tariffs imposed on Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, President Trump threatened a new 50% tariff on China if it does not reduce tariffs against the US.
The reciprocal tariffs imposed by the United States last week are set to take effect tomorrow. Accordingly, a 44% tariff will be imposed on Sri Lankan exports to the US starting tomorrow. In Parliament today, attention was focused on the measures taken by the government in response to the new US tariffs.
US President Donald Trump imposed a 44% reciprocal tariff on Sri Lankan imports to the US. Can the Honourable Minister inform this House what immediate diplomatic or trade-related actions were taken by the government to prevent such a drastic tariff imposition?
We had a meeting with the US trade representative where we discussed the possible option to reduce this trade deficit. The calculation is based on the trade deficit divided by its corresponding imports. Therefore, our proposal should also be based on the ways and means of reducing this particular gap. We will be having another discussion with US Trade Representative Office tonight at 8 p.m. In addition, the President directly wrote to President of the United States, Donald Trump, highlighting the possible ways of mitigating these things and the request for collaborations to reduce these tariffs. The White House has acknowledged that letter received.
Meanwhile, former President Ranil Wickremesinghe, commenting on the US tariffs, warned that they have triggered a trade war likely leading to uncertainty among major global economic powers, either through confrontation or reluctant cooperation. Wickremesinghe emphasised that the Sri Lankan government might fail to meet its revenue targets and warned of possible political instability in Sri Lanka and neighbouring countries due to the worsening economic situation. He claimed that during his presidency, a national tariff policy was planned for January 2025, featuring a simplified four-band tariff structure of 0%, 10%, 20% and 30%, and the removal of many para-tariffs. He also claimed that Cabinet had approved the fast-tracking of a trade national single window to address non-tariff barriers, but added that none of these measures have been implemented as yet. Finally, he urged the current government to resume ETCA negotiations with India within 3 months and to immediately implement the Thailand-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement to gain access to regional markets. Meanwhile, the trade war between China and the United States continues to intensify as President Donald Trump threatened to increase tariffs on Chinese goods unless China reduces the 34% tariff it imposed on the US in response to the new reciprocal tariffs.
If that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade. And it shouldn't be that way.
China, responding to Trump's statement, said it would fight to the end and take countermeasures against the United States to safeguard its own interests.
I would like to reiterate that there are no winners in a trade war or tariff war. Resorting to pressure, threats and blackmail is not the right way to engage with China. China will take all necessary countermeasures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests. If the US truly wishes to engage in talks, it should adopt an attitude of equality, mutual respect and reciprocity. If it persists in disregarding the common interests of both countries and the international community and insists on escalating the trade and tariff conflict, China will, as always, fight to the end.
Should the US proceed with the new tariffs, the total US tariff rate on Chinese goods would reach 104%. However, despite strong statements from both nations, global markets responded positively today amid speculation that Washington may be open to negotiations on some of its more aggressive tariff measures. Asian stocks rebounded from 18-month lows while European shares opened broadly higher. US stock futures also pointed to a positive open for Wall Street, where markets had previously dropped to their lowest levels in over a year before stabilizing. Oil prices steadied today but remained near 4-year lows. While equity markets showed signs of recovery, concerns about a potential global recession heightened by the ongoing US-China trade conflict continued to weigh on investor sentiment.
ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance.
චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිංහ TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Now, amid mounting anxieties over the reciprocal tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, President Anura Dissanayake revealed that plans are underway to send a Sri Lankan delegation to the US to negotiate reducing the tariffs. Speaking at an NPP public rally in Kottava today, the president affirmed that the Sri Lankan government is committed to reaching an amicable solution with the US regarding the tariffs. Another public rally of The Outcome is Clear, Victory is Ours NPP public rally series was held in Kottava today under the patronage of President Anura Dissanayake. We will establish a nation with a resilient economy that can endure any unforeseen shocks by embracing our national heritage and adhering to our economic manifesto. Our economy may be somewhat impacted by the current tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. There is a potential risk, but we are not in danger at the moment. Through continued deliberation, we are attempting to reach an amicable solution with the US government. Yesterday, I personally forwarded a letter to the US President outlining ways to mitigate the impact and reduce the reciprocal tariffs imposed recently. Today, the White House acknowledged the receipt of that letter. Discussions are currently underway to send several government representatives to the US to discuss the pertinent matter with US officials. Now, the International Monetary Fund has appointed Evan Papageorgiou as the new mission chief for Sri Lanka, succeeding Peter Brewer, who concluded his tenure. Brewer served as the IMF mission chief when Sri Lanka faced its worst economic crisis in decades and led negotiations on the $3 billion extended fund facility program approved in March 2023 and oversaw the first 3 reviews of the program. Evan Papageorgiou, who replaces Brewer, is a deputy division chief in the IMF's Asia and Pacific Department and has experience in economic policy and IMF operations in the region. Sri Lankan parliamentarian Namal Rajapaksa highlighted that regional cooperation among South Asian nations is of utmost importance and emphasized that all South Asian nations can benefit from India's development. He made these remarks while addressing the Rising Bharat Summit in India today. Rajapaksa further claimed that Sri Lanka's financial crisis was primarily caused as a result of the negligence of the then government of Sri Lanka. The Rising Bharat Summit 2025 commenced in New Delhi today with the attendance of regional and global leaders. Sri Lankan MP Namal Rajapaksa joined the session themed the South Asian Platter, Menu for Growth, which explores regional development from the perspective of emerging young leaders.
With Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sri Lanka, there are a lot of things that Sri Lanka and India can work together, especially in regional cooperation. And I think it's more of the best interest for each individual country that all leaders are looking at. What matters is now is what sort of cooperation that you build among your region. So I think there's a lot of potential. And today, India has become one of the largest economies economies in the world and growing superpower in the world. And I'm sure the regional countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, all of us can benefit from that if we go on the right path and non-right contracts.
What is the right path for Sri Lanka? Your country has seen a tough couple of years. Do you think the policymakers have learned the lessons?
In our country, we must implement and execute what has to be done at that given time. So what we saw in the past couple of years, because we purely ignored certain development projects based on political reasons, as a result, in 2022, we faced an energy crisis that converted later on into a financial crisis. So I think this is the time that the region should get together and build new partnership on trade. Because what has happened in Washington will affect directly to Sri Lankan apparel or the exports, but also the maritime industry in Sri Lanka.
We also need to ensure that this investment is not weaponized. China, we know, is building infrastructure. India is putting in the money. Who do you trust more now as a partner?
Well, I think it's the best interest for Sri Lanka. What we should look at is that which investment can give you the best return for people of Sri Lanka, rather than looking at it in a very country-specific manner. But I believe it's all depend on the existing governments and the political setup in Sri Lanka, how you manage it. Because investors can come and invest, but at the end of the day, the countries must have a consistency of policies to make sure that the benefits is given back to your own people.
Fast track your career from O levels with eSoft.
ඩයබටිසෝල් සීනි වලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
කැලණි වයර් කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. කැලණි ෆයර් ෂීල්ඩ් වයර්.
New Democratic Front parliamentarian Chambara Sampath Dasanayake, who was arrested over the alleged misappropriation of a sum of 1 million rupees belonging to the Uva Provincial Council in 2016, was granted bail by the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court today. Considering the submissions made by the prosecution and defence, the Chief Magistrate ordered MP Chambara Sampath Dasanayake to be released on a 50,000 rupee cash bond and 2 surety bonds of 2 million rupees each. However, he was unable to leave prison as he was remanded yesterday until the 21st of April by the Badulla Magistrates Court over a separate case filed by the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption. But the magistrate also announced that there is no impediment to permit him to attend parliamentary sessions. Welcome back. Now, Cabinet spokesperson Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa asserted that the Sri Lankan government intends to reap benefits of India's development along its journey towards becoming the third strongest economy in the world. Addressing the Cabinet briefing today, the Cabinet spokesperson noted that all MOUs inked between Sri Lanka and India were presented to the Cabinet of Ministers for approval, adding that the Defence Cooperation Agreement does not impact the sovereignty of independence of Sri Lanka in any way.
සමාජ මාධ්‍යයේ බොහෝ කතා වෙන දෙයක් තමයි ත්‍රස්ත විරෝධී පනත අවශ්‍ය කිරීම පිළිබඳව. ත්‍රස්ත විරෝධී පනතේ බැරෑරුම්කම ඔබතුමන්ලාගේ පක්ෂය කතා කරපු විදිහට වඩා වෙන කවුරුත් කතා කරලා නැහැ මං හිතන විදිහට. ආණ්ඩුව අරගෙන මාස 4ක් වෙනවා. තාම ත්‍රස්ත විරෝධී පනත ගැන කිසිම දෙයක් සලකලා බලලා තියෙනවද? වර්තමානයේ ආණ්ඩුවේ මතය මොනවද? ත්‍රස්තවාදයේ වැළැක්වීමේ පනත
We are of the view that the PTA must be abolished. However, there is no other legislation to tackle the crimes which fall under the act in question. Suspects of organised crime must be detained and questioned. This is made possible through the Prevention of Terrorism Act. This law doesn't care about our preferences and allows us to prevent further crime. Other than that, we have no intention of letting this act prevail. We will pass a new act after we are done reviewing this act. Such an act is crucial to tackle organised crime, drug trafficking and other related crimes.
දැන් මේ කිවිසුම් මේක පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට හරි කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ හරි දැනුවත් නොකර මේ අවපත්තා කිවිසුම් වලට එළඹුණා කියලා විපක්ෂයෙන් චෝදනාවක් තියෙනවා. එමතුමා මේක ඇයි මේ දේවල් එකපාරට හොර රහසේ මේ දේවල් සිද්ධ කරන්නේ?
7 memoranda of understandings were signed during India Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Sri Lanka. Some of these agreements were being discussed for some time. Certain agreements had been initiated before our government was established. However, we have made necessary changes as required after we came into power. Certain MOUs were discussed after we came into power. All of these agreements were presented to the Cabinet of Ministers. If anyone claims that the Cabinet is not aware of these agreements, they are wrong. We have also presented these agreements to the Attorney General's Department. We also amended certain agreements. On the matter of the Defence Cooperation Agreement, the relevant agreement was reached subsequent to discussions between our officials and theirs. Necessary amendments were brought forward during discussions. No one should fear the agreement. Anyone can acquire the content of the agreement under the Right to Information Act. Proceedings of the agreement ensure that the sovereignty and independence of our country are protected. We are responsible for representing the interest of the people.
ඔබතුමා අදහසක් කරා රට සම්බන්ධයෙන් අසංකඩ ගිවිසුම් විදේශ රටවල් එක්ක ඒවා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේදී ජනතාවට හෙළිදරව් කරන්න කලින් ඉතින් එහෙම කළා නම් මේ ප්‍රශ්න මතුවෙන්නේ නැහැ නේද?
ඔබතුමාලා පෙර දැක්වූ අදහසුයි වර්තමානයේ හැසිරීම භාවිතයයි පරස්පරයිනේ.
අපේ ලෝකයේ වෙනස් වීමයි.
We see how the entire world changes, including India and Sri Lanka. The world in 1987 was different from what it is now. Our previous leaders, including Ranasinghe Premadasa, Sirimawa Bandaranayake and other parliamentarians, maintained a stance opposed India. The then government of India imposed undue pressure on Sri Lanka given the situation back then. How the people responded to that situation was different. There's no need to continue the same response now. We have understood the global situation. India has clearly stated their intention of becoming the third strongest economy in the world while maintaining good relations and ensuring the safety of the region. If Sri Lanka has the opportunity to reap some benefits of India's development, the government will definitely do it. This does not mean we should allow the Indian military to enter Sri Lanka again. We are ready to move this country forward while acknowledging the fact that the entire world has changed.
Now, Sri Lanka is to procure 17 million polycarbonate cards for the issuance of the electronic national identity card. Meanwhile, it has been decided to increase the national minimum daily wage and minimum monthly salary in 2 stages. With that, here's more on these and other decisions taken during this week's cabinet meeting. Investors are to be selected to dispose of on a long-term lease basis several lands of the Urban Development Authority. Accordingly, 3 plots of land in Sellakataragama are to be leased for 50 years, while another plot in Dematgoda is to be leased for 99 years. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka is to procure 17 million pre-printed polycarbonate cards for the issuance of electronic national identity cards. In the meantime, several Gazette notifications are to be submitted to Parliament for concurrence. These include the notification revising the tax limit on luxury vehicles, the notification revising the excise duty rates for electric vehicles, and the notification extending the period in which a 50% fee waiver is granted on deviation tax for aircraft departing from Sri Lankan airports. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka is to introduce legislation to safeguard the rights of new plant species. Accordingly, a new act is to be drafted to protect the rights of new species of plants relevant to breeders, researchers and farmers. In the meantime, Sri Lanka's minimum national monthly salary and minimum national daily wage are to be revised. Accordingly, the minimum national salary is to be increased from 17,500 to 27,000 rupees and the minimum national daily wage is to be increased from 700 to 1,080 rupees with effect from the 1st of April this year. Subsequently, the minimum national monthly salary is to be increased to 30,000 rupees and the minimum national daily wage is to be increased to 1,200 rupees with effect from the 1st of January 2026. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka is to draft a National Archives and Document Management Bill to replace the National Archives Law No. 48 of 1973 and the National Archives Act No. 30 of 1981. In the meantime, Sri Lanka is to award the 412 million rupee contract for the procurement of 3 million doses of rabies vaccines for human use to Gulf Pharma Private Limited of the United Arab Emirates. Similarly, the $6.86 million contract for the procurement of 70,000 vials of human immunoglobulin vaccines is to be awarded to India's Reliance Life Sciences Private Limited. Now in business news, as Sri Lanka is battling to overcome the impact of the new US tariffs, a special networking forum aimed at further expanding Sri Lanka's export sector globally was held yesterday, bringing together Sri Lankan exporters and officials from Sri Lanka's overseas diplomatic missions. Organised jointly by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development and the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, the forum enabled participants to explore new market opportunities, discuss challenges and barriers faced and present proposals to enhance export competitiveness. Additionally, it provided a space for sharing views on the newly introduced tariff regulations by the United States, allowing exporters to voice their concerns and offer suggestions for improvement. Meanwhile, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in green today as a result of price gains in banking and capital goods counters after 3 consecutive days of losses owing to the new US tariffs. The all-share price index closed 3.19% higher, the largest daily gain so far in 2025, and closed at 15,127.71 points. The S&P SL20 increased by 4.54% to close at 4,458.49 points. Market turnover was 2.9 billion rupees. The highest contributors to the turnover were Commercial Bank of Ceylon, John Keells Holdings and Sampath Bank. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover, followed by the capital goods sector as the second highest contributor. Foreign investors closed as net buyers, purchasing shares worth 151 million rupees. Meanwhile, domestic investors closed as net sellers, offloading shares worth 2.7 billion rupees. Now, Sri Lanka is to award the contract to purchase 5 shipments of 92-octane petrol to Vital Asia Singapore Private Limited. Bids were called by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation from registered suppliers for the long-term contract and 7 bids were received. The bid submitted by Vital Asia Singapore Private Limited was recommended as the responsive bid by the Cabinet-appointed Special Standing Procurement Committee and the Standing Technical Evaluation Committee. Accordingly, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the awarding of the contract. And that's all for tonight from First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.